Hello and welcome to the Sociology Show podcast. This episode is for those of you taking AQA A-level Sociology. I was lucky enough to interview Circe Newbold, who is a sociology teacher and a lead examiner for Paper 1 and Paper 3. In this episode, Circe talks through her top tips and her do's and don'ts for Paper 1 on the Education with Theories and Methods paper. And so without further ado, let's go over to the interview with Circe Newbold. Enjoy. Hi, Circe. Would you like to tell us a little bit about who you are and what your role is with AQA, please?
Okay, so my name's Circe Newbold, and I've been a senior examiner for AQA for 19 years. Paper 1, Research Methods and Education, is the paper I know really well. But for the last 2 years, I've also been examining Paper 3. Last summer as an examiner, and this summer they've asked me to be a senior examiner for Paper 3 as well.
Fantastic. That's a lot of experience there, Circe. And we're going to talk about Paper 1 to start with. So what's your general sort of do's and don'ts for students on the Paper 1?
I think it's hard to answer that question by itself, but my main thing I would say is it's really important to keep an eye on the time. Don't rush through the paper and spend a decent amount of time on the short questions, because those should be an easy 10 marks. And out of 80, 10 marks can make quite a big difference between grade A star and a grade C.
Yeah, and just thinking about those short mark questions, what is your advice in terms of how to set them out and structure them?
So I would set them out in bullet points. Definitely keep them separate from each other, but don't write too little. So it's really important that you answer the question. And I think the word outline is actually a bit misleading. I think it should really say outline and explain, because that's what they want. Not as big an explanation as the 10-mark question, but actually, so I've thought of an example. So for example, if it was 2 external reasons why working class pupils underachieve, one reason could be lack of parental interest, and that would be your 1 mark. But to get the 2nd mark, you need to explain why that causes the pupil to underachieve. So not getting support with homework, or not having a parent who sort of checks in and supports them. So I would say definitely bullet point them, keep them separate. If you're not sure about the answer, put another answer down. That's always good advice.
Good. And what if the student does put more than 2 or more than 3?
They sometimes do. I mean, sometimes I've read a paper where they could have maybe got 8 marks. If the first one's wrong, they'll credit the 2 that are correct. So there's nothing wrong with putting more than 2 answers down.
Good, as long as you're not spending ages and ages on it, I guess.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I think those first 2 questions, you've got about 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah. And then moving on to the next questions, question 3 and 4, obviously item questions. Some students struggle a little bit with that. So what's your advice on the extent to which students should use and refer to the items?
So question 3, you must use the item twice. You must use the item twice. If you don't, you get 3 marks out of 10, even if you've written a page. So on question 3, it's very, very important. It's very restricted. Use the item. My advice is start each paragraph with the item. Underline the item if necessary. Make it very, very clear that you're using the item. The person marking your paper isn't going to search for the item. Don't make them look for it. Make sure you use it. And then obviously develop the item link into an answer to the question. And you need to do that twice.
Right. And for the question 4?
For question 4, it's less important. And actually, I would say item lifting, where the beginning of the essay starts with the whole item copied out. That's not very impressive. Sometimes the examiner, if they've marked loads of papers, and I think I've done this myself, you start reading it and you're like, wow, that's very impressive. Oh, it's the item.
Yeah.
So don't use it like that. But what I would say to my students is use the item as a plan for your answer. The item is a scaffold for your answer in question 4, because it lays out the debate in 5 or 6 or 7 lines. So yes, you should incorporate it into your answer, but as a way to develop it. I might start the essay with the item, but not the whole item, just like 1 sentence out of the item.
Yeah.
In question 4, the item is a plan. In question 3, it's compulsory that you use the item.
Great. And for question 4, you need to use the item to get to the very top, do you?
Well, I mean, if the answer's really good, we will look for reference to the item, and it could be implicit reference. So you can get 30 out of 30 without making a direct link to the item.
Great.
If it's that good.
If it's that good, that's good to know. And then for question 5, I think it's often quite a weak answer for many students. So what's your advice to gain a top boundary mark for this question?
So question 5, I mean, I really like methods in context. I think it gives students the opportunity to really show their application skills. It is difficult though, and it I think this is probably where being an examiner massively advantages my students, because I know what a really good methods in context answer looks like and what one that isn't so good looks like. Don't need any studies, don't need any theory. It's all about application. So it's quite hard to revise for this question because you don't know what the issue is going to be, but you can revise for the possible context type questions. So for example, you can plan things like getting into a school, getting access to parents, issues around children. You can make some sort of assumptions about children that they might not have great literacy skills. They might be intimidated by a middle-class researcher. They might not want to admit that they're underachieving. And those are general assumptions. So if, for example, that the method is primary method like interviews, those could be weaknesses. So how to talk to children could be a problem. If, on the other hand, the method was something like questionnaires, you could turn that into a strength. So the children don't have to sit in front of a researcher, therefore they might be more likely to be honest. But really, it's not about how much you write. I mean, I've seen answers that are maybe 6, 7 paragraphs got full marks because every paragraph is directly linked to the topic and the context. That's the most important thing with that question.
And talking about that link, so we often see papers where the student's just written a methods answer with no direct links at all. So what's the maximum they can gain if they do that?
It has to be really, really excellent methods knowledge, and then it could get up to 12, but no more than 12.
Yeah, even if it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Good, excellent.
I mean, that question isn't really about methods. It's about application. That's the most important thing that question is looking for. Yeah.
Thank you. And then moving on to the final question, it's another 10 marker. Students often muddle the structure with question 3. So can you just explain the difference for students, please?
No evaluation required for that question. Evaluation will not get you any marks. In fact, I would say you probably lose marks because you write less. That's actually relevant. So it's a bit tricky because what that question does is it takes 2 separate points from the specification and puts them together in a way which might not seem easy to understand. So I think there was 2 ethical issues with primary quantitative methods. So on one side, you've got ethical issues, which is factors affecting the choice of method. On the other side, you've got primary quantitative methods. The idea is to think of an ethical issue, or an issue, in this case, deception, explain why it's an ethical issue, link it to a primary quantitative method. Experiments would be a good example of that. And ideally, have a study which demonstrates that issue. If you can't think of a study, try and think of an example when that might be an issue. And basically, you have to do that twice.
Right. And that was going to be my final question, actually. Does that limit you from getting top marks if you don't have a study in there?
You might get to 10 marks without a study, but I think it partly depends on what the question is. Because those questions can really vary because they could be methods or they could be theory. So like before this, but I think a couple of years ago, it was 2 criticisms of the functionalist perspective.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes throw students a bit because they're expecting it to be research methods.
Yeah.
I think to get 10, there probably would have to be a study or a really good theory reference.
Circe, thank you very much for advice on paper 1. Thank you.
If you are a regular listener to the Sociology Show, then you could help with the costs of promoting and hosting the podcast. If you can spare even a small amount, then you can donate on the gofundme.com website by searching for The Sociology Show. There is no obligation, of course, and all future downloads will continue to be free. A huge thank you to all those that have already donated. Your kind gesture will help to continue keep the show going and growing. Best wishes and keep enjoying the show.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. If you would like to contact the show or be interviewed, then please email the sociologyshowpodcast@gmail.com.